Welcome to another episode of Capacity. Today we have Grady Cope from Reata Engineering and Machine Works in Englewood, Colorado. Welcome, Grady. Tell us about your business. Tell us about Reata. How'd you get started?
Sure. Well, my life is one I try to tell parents of kids going into manufacturing that it's a good way to get into the industry, and it's a good industry to be involved in. When I was in high school, I came to my parents in my senior year and said, I don't want to go to college. I want to go to trade school to be a mechanic. I'm sure they were shocked, but they were fine with that. So I went to trade school. I did that for a year and a half.
How did that idea get in your head in the first place?
I took auto mechanics in high school, and I really fell in love with doing that. Now, I'd always worked with my hands, growing up, but that really, that's what I wanted to do. And so I took it further. I did auto, but then I went into diesel because I really wanted to work offshore. And so when I got out of there, I left Colorado and I moved to South Texas to Corpus Christi, and I started working for Halliburton Services. And I worked onshore and then eventually transferred to offshore and ended up doing that in the early 80s.
Was that what you expected, working offshore?
Oh yeah, I mean, at 19, I was able to fly to work in a helicopter or a crew boat, and I could buy anything I needed to buy to keep equipment going. You would get out on those rigs, and it would be down, and the unit would be down, and they would need immediacy to get it back up because, so you were under time pressure, you were under constraints. A lot of times you were told the parts that they thought they needed, and that's not what they needed. So you had to get creative while you were on the rig, either working with the welders or the mechanics out there to figure out a solution to get our system up and running so we could complete a job or at least start a job while we're waiting for parts. And so it was the awesome experience in terms of gaining confidence in yourself and your ability to do things. And around I think 1984, I was in a truck riding with an old timer there, and we drove past a yard where there was it was just full of land drilling rigs, and I'd never ever seen a drilling rig in that yard ever. And I said to him, what's going on? And he said, well, Grady, that's a recession. And so that was kind of my first experience of what a recession was. And about that time, I started thinking, I've saved money. I made a lot of money working offshore. And I'd like to go back and go to college, go to engineering school. So I came back to Colorado, got my mechanical engineering degree.
How old were you then?
So I would have been, I was 24 when I went back to college to get my engineering degree, and I graduated 4 years later. And then I went to work for a large company it was a Gates Rubber Company, Gates Corporation, and ended up going to work in the synchronous belt development area.
Do you think that if there wasn't an oil recession in the early 80s, you would have continued along that train?
I was ready I knew that I wanted to, I knew that I didn't. You were never home. We worked as a mechanic for Halliburton. You worked 12 days on and 2 off. So you were never home. And I knew that I didn't want to do that the rest of my life because I saw people that were 50 years old that were doing that, and I didn't want to do that. And I knew working with engineers, when Schlumberger would come to the site, they were all engineers. They were all electrical engineers. I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to do is I want to get my engineering degree. And then I might come back. But, I didn't go back to of course, at that point for 20 years, price of oil was nothing for a long time. So there wasn't a lot of growth there. And so when I got out of college, I went to work for the Gates Corporation. And one of the people that we worked with that we was a kind of a small job shop that we would farm our work out to have them make parts. He came up and said to me after I'd been there at Gates about 5 years, he said, you're totally bored here. I said, yeah, I'm not having fun. He says, well, you just need to start your own machine shop. I said, I don't know anything about machining. He says, it's not that hard. You can figure it out. And so, for probably 6 months, we battered back and forth. And he said, I'm going to call you and you're going to do this. And so he called me one day and he said, hey, I found a manual mill and a manual lathe, and they're really good price, and I think you should buy them. And I've got a guy's shop you can set him up in and run, and he'll teach you how to be a machinist. And so I put $6,000 on my credit card and bought the machines, and then I wired him into that shop. And he was a startup too. And he kind of taught me how to machine, or not kind of. He did teach me how to machine. I was never a good machinist, but and realized shortly thereafter I needed to hire a real machinist, and did so. And that was in 1993. And I 3 months later I quit my job at Halliburton and went to doing Reata full time, and we've grown from ever since. And we added our first CNC mill 9 months after we started, and we've been growing ever since. And it's been kind of a fun experience.
What do you think he saw in you that made it obvious to him that you were bored and that he should invest his time in you?
I think he saw what I realized at that point in time, that I'd worked for two large corporations, Halliburton and Gates, and I wasn't a really good fit for a large corporate culture. That just, it wasn't me. I didn't fit. I wanted more freedom. I wanted to try different things and experiment and do different things. And that just wasn't, in those days, you've had to go through lots of paperwork and lots of things to be able to branch out. So I think he saw that, and he had an ulterior motive. He wanted to, I think for 2 years I had to give him 5% of all the customers he gave me. He wanted to retire too, but he was great setting me up. He's also the first person. He told me, having your own business, you'll have the highest highs and the lowest lows. But what he didn't tell me is they can be like 5 minutes apart. So that's good if you're going from a low to a high, but a lot of times you go from a high to a low. But he taught me a lot, and I think when I first started, I started it not because I was an entrepreneur. I started it for a job. I just wanted, I wanted to create my own job, and shortly thereafter, it became an entrepreneurial type endeavor. But between him and the person I started my shop with, who still has a shop, and we've moved, 30 miles from where we originally started, but we're still less than a mile apart from each other, and we still do work back and forth. But we both have made it over 30 years, and it's kind of nice. And he taught me, how not to worry about other shops being competitors, and just to focus on doing the job of what we're really good at, and things would follow, and they kind of have.
Did you always absorb advice and information from the outside really well?
Oh,
or did you have any resistance to anything? Were there things that didn't make sense?
Well, so I absorb all the time. My father-in-law called me an incidental learner a long time ago, in terms of just, listening or whatever, and you take it in and you process it with everything you have. So all my life, I've listened to other people's advice or what they did, and then tried to structure it into something that I could do to make it work, which is always, so I'm always outside the box. I don't want to be normal in terms of how our shop's always, tried something that was really different or weird or before people, because I don't want to be bored, and it's kind of entertaining. So a lot of times Reata has been my form of entertainment, just to keep, me entertained in what we're doing. And that's been always pushing to the edge and trying different things. And that's been the fun part for me. And now it's a struggle sometimes, because you got to find people that want to do that as well, that don't want to get stuck into the every day. And it's also been fun working with banks and stuff to make sure that they want to keep giving you money because you like to spend it. So,
has there been advice that you took that was wrong, that was bad, that you had to alter or reject or had to learn from?
Oh, I'm sure there have. I've made so many mistakes. Of course, it's hard for me to blame or say, well, if I hadn't listened to them, I wouldn't have done this, because I don't think I do things until I say, yeah, I think that's the right thing. But, you make mistakes all the time in business. The thing about a small business is you're always one one mistake from going out of business. So you need to learn to recover from mistakes more than anything. And I think I bought too big of a building too soon, and then the 2008 recession happened, and that almost took us out, but it didn't. And I remember that at that point the bank decided they didn't want manufacturing. We'd never missed a payment or anything, but the bank we were working with, they didn't want manufacturing. They wanted us to go find another bank. I'm like, okay, well. During that period of time, banks were not taking on anybody else. So I told them they have to live with us, and we worked through it, and everything came out fine. But, you just listen to advice, try to see what fits your mindset that you think you can do or want to do, or some version thereof. And then you act on it and look for the feedback.
There seems to be other stuff too that you saw yourself. You said earlier that you started with 2 manual machines, but within 9 months bought a CNC machine. Mm-hmm. How did you gain such quick confidence about that?
Well, at that time, that was the future, right? You could see that was,
not everybody could see that.
Well, maybe not, but I was just, I remember, and of course the technology, the inverse of technology now is just, it's crazy. But I remember watching a tool change and going, oh, that's amazing. And all the little things that were amazing then. And so you just had to jump on that. And at that point in time, I was working for other job shops too, bigger job shops. And I had an older man that owned a job shop that he really became a mentor, and he gave me a lot of work and convinced me not only to buy that one, but to buy a second one. And, they would keep it busy, and they did. And that kind of launched Reata in terms of the CNC world and all the changes that we had to make along the way to make those.
93 is pretty early.
Yeah. You really didn't have
that many people out there that knew how to operate these machines.
Email was just coming on, and
right.
Google was beginning. I don't remember exactly when, but that was all starting to happen. I think the first purchase I made was a fax machine. We still have a fax number. Why, I don't know, but that's gone. It's all gone. That was the way we got our orders. Our POs came via fax, and our prints came via fax. Before that, they came through the mail. So it was this huge transition in the world. And 93 to 2000. You couldn't keep up with technology as it was advancing. It was really incredible. Computers were going to become everywhere. And it was a great time to experience that part of our world and what it was going to set us up for to now.
Did it feel like at that time there were still a large portion of the machining world that was resisting computerization, that was resisting upgrading the machines to add more axes and more tool change capabilities, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, you always have that, right? And whenever I have a chance to talk to someone like that, what I tell them is you might not be in business if you don't want to change. There's a good chance that you'll be left behind, and that's never more true than today. Today, if you're unwilling to change, unwilling to look at the technology, you need to either shut your place down or sell it or do something. I tell my employees and myself in my head all the time, there's a John Mellencamp song that he says, it's not about what you say, it's about what you do. And then his next sentence is, if you're not part of the future, get out of the way. At some point that fits every one of us. And it'll fit me at one point. And I know when I know that, it'll be time for me to step aside because somebody else's future's there. And so in the manufacturing world now, there's lots of changes happening, but there's going to be, I would say in the next 10 years, it's going to be amazing the changes that are happening. And if you don't want to play, you probably need to move on, because it's going to happen. It's going to pass you by. So.
Has it always been obvious to you? So it was obvious in 93. Have all of these phase changes, all this technological advancement, because there's been a lot over the last 30 years. Has it always been as obvious to you the whole time?
I don't know if it's been obvious, or like I say, I did a lot of this for entertainment. It looked entertaining to where it was going. Now, even now, I still look to things like, oh wow, that's going to be really cool. Unfortunately, I know that I won't be part of the future, and I will time out before that becomes something like 3D printing. I mean, if you don't believe that's not going to impact a machine shop, you're wrong. We use it now. It's hard to justify to go out and buy a 3D printer if you don't have an OEM customer behind you to support it at this point. And a lot of them are on revision 1, or the OEMs have them or colleges have them. But I'm just afraid that I'm going to miss out on that part of the world, because when it comes to where it's the thing that everybody has to have, I may be out of the business. But that's one of those things I'm going to miss, because it's going to be really cool to see what happens there. And I think I'll be able to be part of because it's happening now, the AI, machine learning and all those things are happening. And the speed at which it'll happen will be, I think, incredibly fast as the years, within this decade. It'll change a lot about how we do every aspect of machining. I'm talking about from, processing quote all the way to managing your shop, to even how the how it's programmed and the software that will enable it to do that. Automation on the software side and on the robot side is going to be I don't want to say the next big thing. It's been a big thing, but it will continue to be the thing that drives manufacturing forward, and it's going to be cool. And I want to be part of a little bit of that before it goes, because it's going to be it'll be the game changer I'd always hoped for a long time, and especially on the software side that we just can only dream about. And there's things we don't even know that we can do that we'll find out it'll be able to do. And that doesn't mean it's going to eliminate jobs. People always ask that. When I was in college, I heard Isaac Asimov speak, and one of the questions the engineers asked, and that was in, let's say 87 or 88, said, well, how many jobs will not be there because of robots? And he kind of laughed. And if you remember, he wrote in the science fiction, The 5 Laws of Robotics. And he said, no one. He says, but people will be doing jobs that are more meaningful, that'll have more impact on our industry or on your industry than what you expect. So don't worry about it. And he gave an example, and he says, besides, I know of no robot that can play center field and know exactly where to run, exactly when to stop, exactly when to raise their hand, and exactly when to close their hand around the ball and catch the ball. And I challenged my engineers today. I said, does that robot exist? Because the human mind's pretty incredible in what it can do there. So we still are going to need the human mind to even think about being able to do that stuff before the robots can do that. And I don't think they'll take jobs.
I think he's also the one that introduced this concept that, we use the words artificial intelligence, but that's just a very, very narrow understanding of the word intelligence.
It is.
I think there's a lot more expansive things we can do with computers.
Yep.
It seems like, I'm assuming a lot here, I don't know that much about you, but it seems like you pick new technologies right when they become robust. Just based on the timelines that I know about you, it doesn't seem like you are, using one of the first bridge ports before they were really that mature. Yeah. But once they become robust, you adopt them and you implement them. You have some magic sense about that. But in doing that, did that keep you kind of ahead of the curve in terms of your revenue streams, how you interacted with your customers, how the shape of your business changed? There's this phenomenon that I observe where if you don't adopt technology, you take a lot of risk, but your business doesn't change as much. You kind of do the same thing for a lot longer period of time. How did all of this technology adoption affect your business evolution?
You might call us a manufacturer. I call us a customer service organization. So the main thing Reata exists for is customer service. That's our main job, is to provide customer service to our customers, whatever they want, however, speed, change, whatever. Our job is to answer them quickly and try to give them exactly what they want. Well, a lot of that can't be done without technology. Once you have technology, it's amazing the things that you can do, and it changes your whole mindset. I mean, the whole prototyping world, in terms of a fast prototype to be able to provide a customer or a change to a part, 5-axis changes that, because you can have a palletized 5-axis and you can be running production, but customer needs a prototype and can they have it tomorrow? The longest part of doing that prototype is probably the programming. Well, our people will program it while production's running, and then they'll go back and they'll grab a pallet and they'll run the prototype on the 5-axis, and it'll be done in one op in most cases. And then they'll go take and put it in inspection, where it's going to spend some time going through that. Well, we're backing up and running our production runs, and it's impacted us all the time it took to set up, which wasn't much because of technology, and the speed to run it was pretty quick. And then once it comes out of inspection, they know what changes they need to make or whatnot. You run however many, they need 3 parts, you run 3 parts, you're done. They go to outside processing, and they're monitored the whole time through all that. And it was technology that did all that. If I was going to do that back in the, just in a vertical mill, 3-axis vertical mill, I'd have to tear down whatever I was doing. And, the guy would be standing over it the whole time, and it would be a day out of that machine's life. And then it probably wouldn't be set up for night shift to run production, so the machine might sit all night. And these are the things that once you adopt technology, we have the data, we can get back to customers, we know where their parts are, we know what to tell them, when we expect them done. It's just customer service forces you to have technology. Technology allows you to have better customer service. And I think that's a winning combination, and it makes it fun. So one of the things that technology does is, not only does it attract new customers, or your existing customers like to see that, it attracts new customers, but it attracts employees too. We have, our demographics are quite young at Reata, that's on purpose. And technology drives a lot of the young people to want to work there because they want to participate in the technology that we're going to add. And in fact, we had a lot of technology on their advice, and that's a big deal for them and us. And it keeps me young at heart and lets me see what's out there, right? I mean, because at the end of the day, the way parts are made now, it's like a 3D video game. I mean, you insert a piece of material, chips come out one end and a finished part comes out the other end, and it's pretty amazing and magic. And even somebody that's seen as many parts come off of machines, to this day, as I watch some of the technology, I'm like, I want to watch it. I want to stand there and watch it make the part, because it's cool. And if it's cool for me, it's cool for lots of kids that are in junior high and high school, and we work hard to get them into our shop early to let them see, and then work hard to get their parents in there to let them see how cool manufacturing is.
A couple of things to shove I'll get back to about convincing parents about manufacturing, but it's rare and difficult, I think, to think super clearly and simply. And I think you laid out your strategy very simply. There's a relationship between customer service and technology. Mm-hmm. Have you always seen it that clearly? How did you kind of develop that level of clarity? And did you know before a 5-axis palletized system is not cheap. Yeah. Did you know before you made that purchase that it would change the way that you serviced your customers?
Yes. I've been lucky enough that somebody told me early in my career that I should join an association. So I joined the National Tooling and Machining Association, and eventually I started going to conferences. I got involved in the leadership aspect of that. And in 2010, I was chairman of NTMA. And one of the things as chairman, you travel all over the country and visit shops, tour shops. And at that point in time, every shop that I went in, like mine, that was just 3 or 4 axis mills, 2 axis lathes, were all struggling. They couldn't find enough competent people. They barely made a profit, da-da-da-da-da. And then I would go into the shops that had invested all this money in technology, and they were like, oh yeah, we cash flow these machines. We don't even get a loan, and we don't have a line of credit. And I kept seeing that. And so the president of NTMA at the time, I said, man, how do you do that? And he said, well, I'll take you somewhere. And so he took me to Kentucky to meet the American president of Mazak. And it was Brian Papke. And Brian says, well, you need one of our Integrexes. I'm like, yeah, Brian, I don't know how we can afford it. He said, well, we'll figure that out. And I think by the time I flew back to Colorado and landed, they had the Mazak people were in my office to meet with me. And so we added an Integrex, and, Mazak helped me get that and advance it. And all of a sudden I was looking at it, it was producing 40% of what we were shipping out by itself. And I'm like, oh, we need more. And so I invested into horizontals with a Palatex system to automate that, and other Integrex. And as we kept moving along, I kept talking to friends at NTMA that had 5-axis, and Mazak came out with a smaller palletized 5-axis. And so I said, I want to be one of the first to try it. And now we have 2, and it's amazing. It's just changed my whole philosophy on how parts are made.
From that first experience, you weren't an early adopter at all. You'd kind of seen enough data points to be able to clearly understand that there was a bifurcation in the market. You either had this new technology and were performing well, or you didn't.
Yeah, or you didn't. Yep.
Um,
and it's a really hard transition, because the difference in buying a vertical mill like that and buying these machines is probably $400,000 or $500,000 more, maybe more than that. And you're going like, wow, I can't pay for that. How am I going to do that? And the repairs are like the same thing. I mean, a spindle goes out that, 20 to 40 grand or whatever. You're like, how am I going to pay for that? Well, you pay for it because the machines are so productive on what they can do. And it changes the world you live in so much that but you have to go full force. You have to like say, we have to learn, we have to buy software to program it. We have to, and you go through all those things. And once you get there, then you're like, yeah.
How did it feel to implement that? Did it feel like there was resistance and you had to be there saying, nope, we're going to figure this thing out. We're going to figure this thing out, and really push over the edge?
So the first people I trained, I sent out to California to be trained on it. One of them came back and shortly thereafter gave his notice to go work. He went to become a tool representative. So he quit. And then the other guy left. And I had a young guy at high school. He had been to a little bit of a technical school, and I just said, do you want to learn this? And he said, yeah. And he's now our top programmer in the company. He can program Integrexes, horizontals, 5-axes, and it's pretty awesome. And at that time we were using, I think, a CAM system that had been sold, and we switched to Esprit, and he was willing to learn it where some of my older programmers weren't, and they're not there. And it's a bunch of young people now that program in Esprit and have done incredible things. I mean, it's amazing what they can do, and they get huge technical support. I mean, with the internet and videos and stuff, things are figured out quickly, and it changed the company. I would say that's a major inflection point in the change of Reata, and how quickly, because you could put a program in, their posts were so good that we didn't have to edit at the machine, and all of a sudden we were just churning parts through the shop quickly. People say, "Oh, that automation requires more setup." No, it doesn't. If you think about it and do it right, it's the future.
Are there frameworks that you use in your brain that are useful to help you? The fear is the primary emotion that makes you abandon something in the middle of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there something useful that you use in how you think to allow you to push forward rationally?
Sure. So one of the things, and I heard about this early on in my career, I call it the J curve. Some people call it the dip. But whenever you introduce a technology, you're here. And when you start that technology, you fall down. And I tell young people in their jobs, they're going to go through a J curve too. They start here, and then all of a sudden you're gonna fall down. Your productivity falls down, and you start getting depressed and maybe thinking you made the wrong decision. A lot of people exit out here, either their jobs or the technology. But if you stay on, all of a sudden that curve turns, and then it's asymptotic, the way it grows. And that, I think, is probably one of the main functions that when I decide to do a technology that I follow, because I know that it, and trust me, the bottom of that J curve always lasts way longer than I thought. Mm-hmm. But we do get through it, and you just have to fight through it and push through it, and keep everybody's confidence up. As far as in my head on new technology, I first learn about it, I study it, I learn about it, I study it. Another big inflection point is Reata has a CFO. I'd love to say that I hired him. He hired himself, and he changed the company in terms of being able to tell me no or yes, or when I should operate on that. And so he comes into play in a big way for me nowadays in terms of adding technology, just the cost and the time. Can we pull it off or not? And usually working as a team, because of my insistent that we need to do it, he'll run the numbers, and when the number, he'll figure out a way working with me on how we'll make the numbers work. And then we go forward.
Did you have resistance to hiring a CFO yourself?
No, so I was going through, that's one of those times where, every company that started up there's periods of time where they almost go out of business. Well, I was almost going out of business. And he was a part-time CFO. He worked for an accounting firm, and he was helping me negotiate with the bank. We weren't missing payments. We weren't missing payrolls, but we were, our line of credit was maxed out. We were, but we knew things were going to change. We had contracts coming up, and life was going to get a lot better. And he worked with me during that whole year. And at the end of that year, we just had a meeting with the bank, which was kind of positive, kind of negative. And he said, "Hey, can we go to lunch?" And I said, "Sure." And he goes, "Grady, I want to come to work for you full time." And I'm like, "Haven't you seen our financials?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Why would you want to come to work here?" I said, "That'd be great, but can I even afford to pay you?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, no problem." And so I said, "Awesome, let's make it work," because I knew I needed that. I needed that data. I needed cash flow statements every day. I needed to monitor all that, and it's probably the biggest inflection point of the company history, because it allowed me to focus on the stuff that I wanted to focus on. I wasn't interested in that. I mean, I was interested, but not to the point of, and so I don't even worry about that part of the bit. I mean, he tells me when to worry now. He tells me no when I need to be told no, because I'm one of those people that would probably spin the company into bankruptcy. Just let's try this, let's try that, and so he controls me there. But he's also helped develop a good plan of execution, get the right people on the bus and the right seats and all that. And he's much better than that than I am. And those are the things that you need to drive your company forward.
Has he told you since what motivated him to want to work for you, even though he saw all of the scar tissue and the bumps and bruises?
Well, he flatters me. He says it was because of me. We are not at all alike, which is what I think companies need to make sure they don't hire people like. We see the business world through different lens colors, and it just allows us to work together. Do we agree all the time? No, but we figure out a way to come up with an agreement or whatnot. But But I think he's changed me in such a way that it's as much a partnership as anything, because he tells me, stuff that I wasn't thinking about or worrying about, or sometimes I'm too nice, and Tom, he's always like, this is what we're going to do. We got to hold the line here. You got to be tough here, and he's been right. And during the inflation period we went through, one of the hardest things for me ever in the business was like to raise prices. And Tom's like, well, we got to. And he was right. And we did. And we even, at some points in time, got to a point, I would never put a customer on hold for not paying, because I just it would scare me that they'd go away. Well, Tom had no problem with that. And I let him do it. And all of a sudden, those people pay their bills going forward. So there's been a lot of things of discovery, because we're not alike, that we learn to interact with and make changes that were for the positive.
So oftentimes, even those stories of how much better it is afterwards, even if they're really clear, it's hard to communicate that to someone who hasn't, formalized their business in that way. How would you talk to yourself beforehand? Even if you couldn't predict that you would have met someone like Tom, how would you have convinced a younger version of yourself that, hey, it's about time for you to think about adding structure to your business?
Either somebody gives you the advice, or there's somebody talking in the back of your head, your little committee that you have in there talking to you about that. And I think what you do is you just constantly go through the positives and negatives about that. And what will this change? What will that do? What will this do? And at some point, if you're somebody that likes to write pros and cons, that's an excellent tool. I tend to do that in my head, or I tend to sometimes maybe my gut is telling me the opposite of what my head's telling me, and I'll go with my gut. And I would say the majority of the time that's been right, just because you just, it's a higher cost or whatever, but you figure out a way that it's going to work and make it happen. And you let your inner self help you. If you're unsure about something and you think about it long enough, you can get yourself sure. Or are you sure because of fear? If it's fear, you just can't let fear drive your strategy. If you do, fear was only going to pull you back the other way. You have to overcome the fear and make sure your mind's clear, and know that fear is always there. Fear is a good tool, monitor, but you can't base all your decisions on fear.
Do you have somebody in your personal life that helps balance you and say, Grady, you got to go talk to your mentors, or you got to go, think for a while?
My wife. So we met in third semester calculus class. She's was an electrical engineer. I was a mechanical engineer, and she has her own business. It's an electrical engineering company, and she's a lot better at business than I am, to be honest. I mean, she's done well. She's always stayed in her lane and drives things, but she would always tell me, you should do this, you should do that. And she would be my fear in terms of, I want to buy a machine. Oh, can we make it work? But she would always come around, but I would have to explain it to her how I could make it work, and then she would buy into it. But she was always driving. I mean, she always told me, Grady, you need more women in your workplace. And it's like, if we could just find them. And she said, well, you just need to figure out a way to make that happen. And we did. We started bringing women in from the high schools. My director of operations is a woman. And all of a sudden that did amazing things to start attracting more women into the shop. And I will tell you, that's another major game changer. They've changed the way we do a lot of things, and it's been a real positive. And one of my arguments to people that say we can't find enough workers, I say, have you looked at women? And they go, no, how's that going to work? And I said, well, I have women that are machinists, I have women that are assemblers, I have women in management. I think our management is more women in it than it does men, and they've done an excellent job. It's been an ignored part of the manufacturing workforce forever. And it's my wife kind of beat on me a little bit that way. And she was right. And keep in mind, when she was in my third semester calculus class in the 80s, there wasn't a whole lot of women in engineering.
Sure,
so,
yeah.
there was like 3 or 4 of them that I remember going through. So she got it. She understood. And she's been that force that keeps me, motivated and kind of stable, keeps me from being too crazy about stuff sometimes.
So hooking into that, earlier you said that one of the things you do is you work with the parents of these students to convince them that manufacturing is maybe different than what they think. What do they think manufacturing is, and how do you show them that it's different?
Christina, our director of operations, as she brings on the interns, she says, okay, the interview though that we're going to have is we want all of you to come, and we want your parents to come, because really the interview is proving to the parents that manufacturing is a cool place to be. And so we do everything we can to get the parents to come to that initial meeting and tour them through the shop so they get to see. And we get letters back from parents saying this was the most magnificent thing for my child. It changed the way they look at things, the way they do things, and it changed my mind because I had no idea manufacturing was the way it was. We had no idea that. I remember I was given a tour one time. It wasn't to parents, but it was to some people from the University of Colorado, and one of the ladies picked up a part, and she said, "I thought you'd get stuff like this from a hardware store." And I said, "Yeah, because it grows on a hardware tree." But see, that's how removed people are from manufacturing. I mean. And we just have to get them back to make them understand that it's a clean, it's cool, it's working with your hands, it's working with your mind, it's a dance in science and technology and art all in one, and you really contribute. At the end of the day, you can go out and see your work out in the world and know that you contributed to society and know that it did really good, and that's. For me, that's the coolest part about manufacturing is at the end of the day, the product has to ship and it gets shipped and then it gets put on stuff or gets used. I mean, one of the coolest things that I ever remember was we worked really hard on a surgical instrument that would be used for trauma. And we shipped it out to go to the hospital for the doctor that invented it right before the 4th of July weekend a few years ago. And that weekend, it was used to save 3 lives. And a couple months later, the product came back for us to review and make measurements on to see how it worked. And I remember my director of quality was holding the part, and he was working it through its things. And I said, just imagine what you're holding in your hand there has been used to save lives. And he stopped and he goes, "Oh my God, I never thought about how amazing that is." I go, "Yeah, that tool right there was used." And I mean, I don't know how more or how closer you can get to actually contributing to society than that. And for me, that was kind of a little exclamation point on what we've done and where we are and how we do it. And we work really hard to convince the parents, and especially the mothers. If you can convince the mothers that this is a great industry for the kids, and I mean male or female, it doesn't matter. It's just a great place to do your career, and you can make plenty of money. It's not like and you can go back. You can go to trade school. You can learn. You can be an apprentice, and you can do that. And you can do just like me. And then you can go back to college and be an engineer, and you'll be the smartest engineer that any company that hires you after that because of the experience you had.
Yeah, you know how to actually make the thing.
Yeah, I mean, I hate the term, but some people call it the carpet people versus the concrete people. And I always say, well, the great part about my life is I can straddle both and do just fine. And when you can do that, I think that's where you really, you understand both sides of the wall and can conquer it. And the reality is I love the concrete side. And I try to every day. I go up and speak to every person that works at Reata and try to say hi to them and have a story. We might have a story together with them or whatever. But I love that. And even on our weekend shifts, I try to make sure I get in every once in a while to make sure I talk to everybody on weekend shifts and stuff, because at the end of the day, it's all about us humans working together to make the company profitable and to add something to our customers and to the world we live in.
So embedded in a lot of things you said, you have, I would say, a above average belief that you can train younger people and that they can grow really fast. You can develop them. You have kind of an above average appreciation for how important culture is. Did you learn these things through necessity? Did you read a book? Was it given to you somehow? Did you develop it yourself? Like how did that evolve, that belief set?
Well, I read lots of books, so I take in a lot of information. So I'm sure all of that's contributed. But I look at myself, and in high school I didn't make A's in math. And I remember I asked a high school teacher once, why do I need to learn algebra? And his comment was, because I told you need to. And that shut me down. I think I made a D in algebra. And then I went and worked offshore, trade school, and came back. And I made straight A's in math and in engineering. It was all because I was motivated and knew and liked what I did. So I learned that you can learn anything if somebody helps motivate you, or you can motivate yourself. That's the key. And if you want to keep learning, life never gets boring, ever. And now we have, I worry that it's like, there's so many things I want to learn about. I don't know if I've got enough time in my life to be able to learn all this stuff. And we have the ability, we've got YouTube, we've got Audible books, we've got podcasts, we've got all this stuff to gather all this information and get us excited and bring that into work and get people excited about moving forward or changing their lives and learning manufacturing. And who knows where you'll end up. If you want to, all I know is you can end up wherever you choose to end up. If you want to own a shop, if you want to be me, there's nothing stopping you. Everything exists, and it's just finding the right shop that'll help you get there, and then finding making sure you study and you read about all the things that you want to read about to be able to do it. And my shop will probably be available at some point in time. So don't. And the other thing is I'm the first generation. Every shop that I've ever seen that goes on to second gen, and I don't mean family. Mine won't be passed on to my wife. And I don't have any children because we spent too much time. I guess our children were our businesses, but whoever takes over Reata, or whoever takes over the second gen of all these small companies, I've always noticed that's their biggest growth spurt that they ever have. They're the most successful as far as profit and as far as growth ever. And so I think that's what's wonderful. If you're part of Reata now, you'll get to participate in that as the company moves forward.
Are you good at motivating people?
I don't know. That would be a question for my people. I don't know. I don't know if I'm good at motivating myself. If motivating myself counts, that helps motivate them. Now, I have, trust me, I have my share of problems that I'm not a celebrator. So I make sure that I have other people in the company that'll do that. I think it's the way I was raised. Nothing was ever good enough. So every time I hit a goal, I just, now I set a new goal in my head, and I don't celebrate that. And, everybody's going like, but Grady, we just did this. And so now there's people that make sure we celebrate that because I've already set the next goal and I'm ready to move on. That's a really good trait, but it's a really bad trait. And that's one that I have to make sure that there's other people to motivate and celebrate things, and because that's not me. I'm just moved on. And
I've heard that a lot actually recently from business owners, that there's a paranoia that if you celebrate things too much, that you're going to fail the next time, right?
Yeah. I mean, last year was a record year in every standpoint, we won lots of awards. We did great things. And in the back of my mind is like, oh my gosh, we'll never be able to repeat this. What are we going to do to make next year or the following year? And those are really hard things. It's like, gosh, maybe I should have retired last year because we did so well. But the reality is no, I want to keep going. And what's next? And who are the next people that are going to step up and change Reata for all the better? And what customers are we going to? Because remember, we're hiring lots of young people. While our customers are starting to be younger too.
Yeah.
And so now they're really going to be able to talk the same language and be able to do, which I think it's exciting. Awesome. Yeah. The future is I think extremely bright for Reata and for manufacturing. Anybody that doesn't know what they want to do, they should look at manufacturing just because it's cool.
So before we move on to the future and legacy, I want to ask two uncomfortable questions.
Mm-hmm.
There's a CEO that I admire that says to his employees all the time, I wish you pain and suffering, because that's where you learn the most. You talked earlier about having this roller coaster where your highest highs and your lowest lows could be right next to each other. What was the most extreme, most painful memory that reminds you of those highest highs and lowest lows?
The Great Recession in 2008 was a pretty painful time because we had to let go of so many people and we went on reduced hours. But it was also a pretty rewarding time because both us working with our vendors and everybody worked together to make sure enough cash got exchanged so everybody stayed in business. I had to deal with the bank then, but I think 5-6 years later, I kind of had my own internal recession in the company, which was the worst one. That's where Tom was on board helping me. The bank had put us into a workout group, which was really bad. And I argued with them that they didn't. We had never missed it. We never in 30 years have we missed a payment or a payroll or any of that. But, the world wasn't good in toward the financials and everything else. And it was sales would fix everything. And that was, we were working on that. But I can remember sitting in those meetings with the bank and just saying, how can you guys not believe in me? How can you not have faith in me? And they didn't. I did. And maybe I was the only one. My wife probably was there. And Tom clearly believed in me. And, I had to ask my wife for money. I mean, I really had to humble myself during that time. But we pulled out of it. Now, I would tell you that probably none of the employees knew. I mean, they knew things were tough, but they did not know how bad they were. But that was probably the one time that almost ended it for Reata. But
how long did that low last? Like, how long did you?
It was probably 8 months, 6 to 8 months. I mean,
it's a long time.
It's a long time, but it's also a short time. People always think about, they don't go on for years. I mean, the bank wouldn't let them go on for years, but they go on long enough to give you pain. But during that time, you just have to be creative and figure it out. And we say entrepreneurs, they don't have a lot of self-doubt. That's why, people always say, why did you wait till the bank took the keys out of your hand? And the reason for that is up until the very second they take the keys away from you, you believe you're going to turn it around. You do not sit there and go, well, I should just quit, because then you're not an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs never, ever believe they're not going to make it. They're going to do everything they can to figure it out, and they're going to believe. And maybe it's to their detriment, but it's also the reason that the ones, survive and move on to the next phase. And I mean, that was one of the things at NTMA I learned. I talked to a lot of the people that were older, had big shops. They'd all been through these things, and they'd all worked through it, and it made the company stronger and better for it, made them as a leader stronger and better for it. So the no pain, no gain is absolutely true. I mean, I know there's people that have never been through a bad downturn or whatever. Be patient. It will happen. And if it doesn't, you've been extremely lucky, or you're one of a kind gift. But until you go through those, you don't I don't think we would ever go through one that bad again, because with Tom, we're so on top of our numbers that we're going to pay attention, and we're going to act and do all the painful stuff we need to do way before it's too late.
Yeah.
And that in business, those ups and downs are there. Just don't jump out at the bottom of that J curve. Ride that J curve back up to the top and then above, even higher, because that's what'll happen. And you got to put your head down and focus and work.
If there's one piece of advice, learning that you've had that you would implant in your own brain when you first started the business, what would that be? What would be the thing that would impact you the most that you wish you learned earlier?
So the one thing I tell everybody, I get back to the customer service. And you could go up and ask anybody at Reata if you use the word try. I go back to Yoda. Yoda says, do or do not. There is no try. So my people hate that. But what I explain to them is, whenever you tell a customer that you're going to try to have them their parts on Friday, customer heard they're going to have their parts on Friday. In the back of your mind, you're not going to have their parts until next Tuesday. But you didn't want to tell them that because you were afraid that might upset them or whatever. But you're going to upset them worse now because they heard Friday. But I said try. Well, no, do or do not. There's no try. And I'm going to hope that we're going to do that. No, because you've just set up in your mind you're not going to. Just tell me when you're going to do it and do it. And I think that is like that's if there's anything that I've learned about work, it's do it now. If it's big and it's important to the customer, you do it now, and you figure out how you're going to get it, and you make that promise, and you keep that promise. And the moment you can't keep that promise, you tell them. You don't put it off. You tell them. And 90% of the time, your customer saves you and say, you know what? When you're going to have it to me is fine. I'm not going to have this till that. It's going to be fine. But if they don't save you, then you caused them grief, and you don't want to do that. And I'll say this. I mean, our biggest mistakes, our biggest screw ups that we've ever had with customers, it's how you perform after that seals you into being a customer. So my best customers we made our biggest mistakes with was how we performed after we made those mistakes to dig out of the hole that sealed us into them. Because when everything's going good, every shop's the same. It's how you do when things aren't going so good that defines you as a vendor for that customer.
Yeah, people aren't bonded in success. They're bonded in adversity.
Yeah.
So one of the things that motivates us here is that once you work with manufacturing a little bit, it becomes really obvious that this is extremely generational in value. From a civilization perspective, generationally advancing manufacturing helps everything. It's at the bottom of the pyramid, right? What are your hopes? You've said a couple times that you want to keep learning and you want to use as much of your time that you have left to learn as much as possible. But after you pass the torch on, where do you hope Reata or manufacturing as a whole, where do you hope this goes?
Well, I hope that they will continue to focus on customer service and advancing manufacturing and bringing new people in and advancing that. That would be, if I have a legacy, the legacy that I would like to leave behind is that Reata remains customer focused, customer service focused, and we definitely add diversity in terms of women and minorities. Everything you can imagine, just bringing that into manufacturing and knowing that that will drive the technology along with it. I mean, that's my legacy. If I can leave and say I think the company will continue to grow in all those ways, that would be perfect for me.